Welcome to the Family Partnership Session Supporting Older Children with Reading Needs. This is a session requested by and created for families. Our colleagues and partners at the Michigan Alliance for Families surveyed families, parents, and caregivers about topics of interest. Michigan's MTSS Technical Assistance Center responded to the requests by creating sessions specifically designed for families. If you're joining us as an educator, please put on your family hat and think about your own children, grandchildren, nieces, or nephews for our session today. If you'd like to find our session materials for today, you can find us at MiMTSS Technical Assistance Center or TAC.org, MiMTSSTAC.org. Once you follow us to this website, you can click on Professional Learning. When you click on Professional Learning, you can then go to Session Materials. Once you're in Session Materials, you can search for Older Children. And as you do that, our materials will pop up. When you click Learn More, you'll find additional information about our agenda, our outcomes for the day, as well as a training plan. In the training plan, you'll be able to locate additional information. If you'd like to join in and add to our Padlet and see what other families, parents, caregivers, grandparents have added about reading with their kids, you can do so there. You can also find electronic materials in our Google folder, and you can find the link there as well, our electronic Google folder. And you can see some additional activities for before and after our session today. When you click into our training plan and you find the electronic Google folder, it'll open up a folder within Google that looks like this. You'll find copies of our PowerPoint. You'll also find additional information like definitions. These can be helpful to preview before our session today and review at the end of our session. You'll also find guided notes for our session today, so you're welcome to, if it helps you, hop into our guided notes, take a look at them, and complete those, fill those out while you're listening today. You'll also find checklists for 2 of the routines that we'll work on today. In addition, you'll find tips for supporting reading skills at home, as well as evidence for those tips, and our IES practice guide providing reading intervention for students in grades 4 through 9. Take a minute to go ahead and get yourself organized. You might want to review or preview some of the materials, find the training plan and the electronic folder, and maybe gather some scrap paper, a pencil, and a pen to get ready for our session today. I'd like to acknowledge the amazing work that's been done by our national partners, as well as our friends and colleagues at the Meadows Center and the Michigan Alliance for Families. Our Creative Commons license allows us to share, but also protects our work. You can share or adapt the resources from today, but please give the MiMTSS Technical Assistance Center credit and show where those changes have been made. Quick disclaimer today about curricula and intervention. Any mention of specific literacy curricula or intervention programs in this presentation is for instructional purposes only. The MiMTSS Technical Assistance Center and the Michigan Department of Education do not endorse particular curricula or intervention. You will see, however, a list of approved curricula and intervention programs through the Michigan Department of Ed and the Committee for Literacy. If you'd like to see more about that, you can go to the link or you can go to the website in parentheses below. The same is true for our assessments. If you'd like to see a list of approved literacy screening and progress monitoring assessments, you can see these through the Michigan Department of Education at the K-12 Literacy and Dyslexia Law page. You can use the link or you can go to the web address in parentheses. The purpose of this session is to welcome families of all configurations, cultures, and languages into a conversation and learn about how we can support older children with reading needs. As we move forward in our learning today, please remember to have conversations with your child's teacher or team at school. You may find some routines that are helpful at home today, but you may also have conversation that leads to additional routines or other routines that might be more beneficial in your situation. At the end of our session, we'll be more able to differentiate between myths and facts, understand what works for older children, share accurate information with families, other families, parents, caregivers, community members, learn a few new routines to help us at home, and reflect on the family role in developing relationships, celebrating strengths, having conversation to and from the school, and lifting barriers or issues. Go ahead and take out your scrap paper and jot your answers to the following questions, true or false. I can tell the difference between myths or facts, true or false. I can share about routines that are proven to work, that have strong evidence, true or false. This is our agenda today. In our agenda, we'll take a look at what we already know about literacy, review some myths and facts, discuss some big ideas. We'll learn a couple routines to help at home, and we'll continue to reflect on building family partnerships, some helpful resources, and possible next steps. Go ahead and take out a piece of paper and let's look at a few statements that are myths or facts. So on your scrap piece of paper, jot 1 through 7. These are our myths and facts. Go ahead, take a look, and as you number your paper 1 through 7, jot whether you think that statement is a myth or a fact. Go ahead and stop the recording if you'd like to take a minute to do that. So, how did you do? Let's take a look. Let's take a look at number 1. Reading growth is biggest in elementary grades. That is a fact. Kids in K3 are learning to read, and 4 and above tend to be reading to learn. But we never stop learning, and we'll be learning from pre-K through 12th grade and beyond, especially in regard to big words that are unknown words, developing language and continuing with our language comprehension or different reasoning skills and understanding difficult text. So being able to use all of our language skills, being able to use all of our decoding or word recognition skills to put together a way to understand all of the text that we read and to comprehend what we're reading all the way through the grades. Let's take a look at the next one. Kids in K3 are learning to read, and 4th and up are reading to learn. That is true. Difficulty understanding text doesn't impact school success. When we think about gaps in reading, we know that kids can have increased frustration. They can lead to avoiding class, skipping school. Kids can act out in some way. We know when we have gaps in reading, it can impact us in many different ways. Socially, like how others think about us, teasing. Behaviorally, how we're acting in response. Academically, in terms of the impact and on how we're doing. So when we have gaps in reading, it can really impact our whole lives. Let's look at the next one. Using routines at home and school can benefit kids. This is a fact. This is true. Cunningham and colleagues in 2022 talked about this, as well as using routines as a protective factor. When using routines, so when we have time together to read with our kids, our grandkids, our nieces, our nephews, when we use routines that may be consistent with what's being used at school or might be something that's been recommended by a team or a teacher, or you and your child's teacher have come together and come to an agreement about what to use, we're creating a positive environment. We're helping to set a child up for success by having some routines that they can apply whenever they're encountering a word that they don't know, for example, or when they're having trouble comprehending a text, for example. So as protective factors, routines can work against other types of stress. Kids know what to expect. They know what to do. And this in and of itself also can decrease their stress. We know when we're using consistently routines with older children and when we work with them to internalize that routine or make it their own, they can begin to apply that routine throughout their day. And that's empowering. When we internalize that routine or own that routine, it's empowering to help when the same situation pops up at school or across different content areas. When we have gaps in our reading, it impacts our whole lives. And we need to have tools to be able to approach that gap and approach that frustration. And we need support and collaboration between home and school so that all kids have successful literacy experiences across all disciplines at school, across all content areas at school, and both in and outside of the school. In addition to developing a habit or a routine at home by using different strategies or different routines to help with literacy, we can also help by creating positive family partnerships. So, what is family partnership? You may or may not be familiar with this term, but Mapp and Bergman in 2019 talked about a dual capacity framework for family and school partnerships, where partnership is built on mutual trust. It's linked to learning and development. It's asset or strength based, culturally responsive and respectful, collaborative and interactive, and may involve co creation. When educators are empowered to connect family engagement to learning and development, engage families as co creators, honor family funds of knowledge or the expertise that families bring about their child, and create welcoming cultures, we can have an impact on student learning. What is that impact? Well, we know from MAP and colleagues in 2002 that there's an increase in attendance. There can be an increase in attitudes toward learning, improvement in grades, improvement in behavior. Kids can end up going on to reach higher levels of education, higher graduation rates. Those can go up. And we have more students and more children enrolling in post-secondary education. Family partnership is powerful in and of itself. And so when we do our part on each side, educators and families, to develop trust, to link our work to learning for kids, for the whole child, when we focus on strengths and assets, when we are culturally responsive and make sure that what we're doing works for all the groups that are part of our school environment, and that all of our families are welcome in our environment. And when we celebrate different family structures and different cultures, when we can be collaborative, interactive, work together to create supports, maybe professional learning together, maybe routines that families can use at home together, but maybe looking at data, maybe even creating an action plan based on our data. When we're respectful and when we all can honor family expertise and knowledge about their child, we can have an impact on kids. So, family partnerships for literacy are critical for student success. And when family partnership happens in a multi tiered system of support with focused efforts on data, systems, and practices, our children, all children, are more likely to get the services and supports that they need. They're more likely to have themselves see themselves represented and reflected, and see the diversity of the children around them represented and reflective in the curriculum, and to receive evidence-based instruction intervention and when needed. And working together, we can create a system that is more equitable for all of our children. And we can begin to do this through developing positive family partnership. It takes everyone working together to create the impact we want to see, an impact on achievement for kids. We can impact how kids feel about themselves, what they believe to be true about themselves, what their options for the future are, and their skills. It takes frequent communication between home and school, both sending information to from home to school and from school to home, and a plan for home and school learning. As you look at the data on the slide, you can see where we are. This is an ongoing issue. It's not new. As kids get older, there's a shift from learning to read to reading to learn, and text becomes increasingly more complex. Reading is happening across the school day, and text becomes more difficult across more content areas. And kids who are struggling with reading proficiency need support with reading both at home and at school. When we use a multi-tiered system of support and the school environment, John Hattie talks about the effect size as being 1.06, which is a large effect size. So when we use multi-tiered system support framework, we can have a greater impact on student success and student achievement. You may have heard educators or teachers talk about the simple view of reading. You might be wondering what's meant by the simple view of reading. It's a way to understand how kids learn to read. First, it's a multiplication formula. So you'll see the multiplication sign in the middle, and you'll see that there are two areas that it takes to get to reading comprehension, or the ability to extract and construct meaning from text. You'll notice that the first is word recognition and decoding, and that's the ability to read words accurately and quickly. And it's multiplied by the ability to extract and construct meaning from spoken language. To understand what's being said around you, that's language comprehension. And it takes both of these to get to reading comprehension. It takes both the ability to read those words accurately and quickly and the ability to extract and construct meaning from spoken language in order to construct meaning from text as we're reading. So, what are a few ideas to take home with you? First, it takes both parts to get to the ability to extract and construct meaning from the text that we read. And an instructional emphasis might shift depending on the developmental age of your child and the work that they are doing around different skills. However, instruction should never happen on one side alone or the other side alone. It takes both. So you might be wondering what this is. This is a learning progression. And across the top, you can see grades. So you can see pre-kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. And across that row that we're looking at, you can see what the different skills are, the different focus areas that are connected to each of those grades. So just like we looked at the simple view of reading and we saw word recognition, we have word recognition areas. And beneath word recognition, we have specific areas that are being developed and important to learn. And you can see when those concepts or big ideas or skills are associated with different grades in school. So you can see K1, 2, 3, 4, and you can get a sense of what's happening during those grades. In those grades, the big idea around third, fourth, really becomes that multisyllabic word decoding, or really breaking apart those big, tricky words. You can also see while skills in the word recognition area on top are being developed, at the same time, language comprehension skills are also being developed. So when you can see their oral language, background knowledge, higher order cognitive skills, inferencing and reasoning, you can also see comprehension or monitoring, or am I paying attention to what I'm reading? Am I monitoring that I've understood what I've read? You can see all of these areas and skills as you look at the bottom. The goal is for all of these to get more accurate, to get more fluent along the way. And when that happens, the rope tightens up and tightens up. So when we are reading, we're more accurate, we're more fluent, and we understand the words and the language that is used and that we read, and we understand the bigger meaning within the text. So, what works for older children with reading needs? Take a look at these 4 big ideas and go ahead and jot down what you think has the strongest evidence. 1, 2, 3, or 4. Go ahead and stop your recording so you can complete this task. So you can see the level of evidence here. You can see strong evidence. You can also see moderate evidence. So we know that these are routines, these are strategies, these are areas to focus on that have the biggest impact. When we look at number 1, recommendation number 1, it focuses on decoding words, including breaking apart larger words with many word parts, or we call those multisyllabic words. We'll learn a routine today that can be used at home and school for these multisyllabic words. If kids use these routines consistently, then they know what to do when they run into a long word, which happens more and more frequently as kids move through the grades. This helps empower kids to break down what a word might be from a very intimidating word to a word that I can sound out and I might know. If we look at recommendation 3, it has 4 parts. And today we'll focus on getting the gist, which is part C. This helps us to summarize and create an understanding of what the author is saying. It can help in the immediate, within a sentence or within a paragraph. It can also help as kids move through the grades to track multiple pages or a chapter across different content areas. When we use the get the gist strategy, the routine can help us understand what we read and can help us remember what we've read. So let's think about some routines that you already use at home to help older children with reading. Let's zero in on a few that can also be used, whether it's home or school, to help older children with areas where reading breaks down. Like we said, these are longer words with lots of word parts called multisyllabic words. Before we do that, let's take a minute to jot down routines you already use. Think about the routines you currently use to help your older child at home. First, let's take a look at an example of a routine to build decoding skills for multisyllabic word reading. That's recommendation 1, and it focuses on how to read big words. So this is called the multisyllabic word reading routine for home. When you're reading together, you might notice bigger words with many parts. These are multisyllabic words, and these can be tricky. You might also notice teachers using this particular routine at school. You can see this routine in the Institute of Education Sciences, or IES, practice guide. As words get bigger and bigger through the grades and content areas, this routine can be used at school and at home too. So, what is the multisyllabic word reading routine? If you see or hear or notice things like, I don't know this word. What is this big word? I've never seen this word before. If you hear your child hesitating before longer words, words with multiple parts, avoiding to read longer words with multiple parts, or looking to you to pronounce words, longer words with multiple parts, this is a routine that might be helpful. So why would we use it? We use the multisyllabic word routine to help kids to decode longer words with multiple parts. As kids get older and progress at school, words get longer and more difficult across all content areas. So having a routine, knowing a routine that can be used either at home or at school whenever reading is happening can be a powerful tool. So how do we use this routine? Dr. Anita Archer, one of our colleagues and friends, has an Archerism where she says, say the parts quickly, say the word, and make it a real word. Within the multisyllabic word reading at school, what we'll do are a number of steps. So we want to let kids know why we're using the routine, and it's to help us read big words. We want to underline the single vowels or vowel consonant combinations in the word. We want to count the number of vowel sounds to determine the number of syllables. We want to break the words into parts, with each syllable having a vowel sound in it. And then we want to blend each part together to form a word that we recognize. We want to read those syllables at a faster, more fluent rate, and then read them within a sentence and check our understanding. Before we get too far, let's talk just a little bit about the evidence. This is one of the routines that Sharon Vaughn and colleagues in 2022 talked about. And this is one of the routines that is recommended for older students with reading needs. So before we get too far, let's take a look at our multisyllabic words, examples and non-examples. So when we think about a multisyllabic words, examples could be things like hallway, computer, everyone, multisyllabic, geometry, trigonometry, illustriousness. When we think about non-examples, we're thinking about words like hall, book, read, art, lunch. These are all non-examples of multisyllabic words. So let's take a look now at the examples or non-examples. Take a look. Which ones do you think are examples of multisyllabic words? Take a minute and jot those down. So let's look at our routine. So first we talk about why we use the routine. So we might say something like, we use the routine to help us break down and make manageable words with lots of parts, big words with lots of parts. Then we look for our familiar syllables and word parts. We read the syllables slowly, then we read them faster at a more fluent rate and read the whole sentence and check for understanding. So let's take a minute to do that. So when we're looking at the word multisyllabic, our first step is really to go ahead and underline those vowels. All right, so we have all of our vowel sounds underlined here. Then we're looking for familiar syllables and for word parts. One of the ways we know that we have a syllable or a word part is to pay attention to what's happening with our chin. Every time we get to a vowel, our chin is going to drop, and we know that this is a syllable or word part. So, for example, mal, my chin drops. Tie, my chin drops. Sil, la, bic. Every time I get to a word part, my chin drops. So let's do that one again. Mal, tie, sil, la, bic. So we can also show it this way. Mal, tie, sil, la, bic. And then we put that word together. Multisyllabic. Then we read it faster. Multisyllabic. Then we read it faster. Multisyllabic. Yes, multisyllabic. That's right. So then we might go ahead and read that in a sentence. So go ahead and write down on a piece of paper. We use multisyllabic words routine to help us with the instruction of big words. So we use a multisyllabic word routine to help us with the instruction of big words. Go ahead and read that sentence out loud. Great. Let's take a look at another example. So we might say to a child, we're using the multisyllabic word routine to help us understand big words and help us pronounce big words. So we start with the vowels. What are our vowels? Go ahead, write down the word instruction and start by underlining those vowels. Yeah, so it might look like this. Then our next step is to look for familiar syllables and word parts. And this is the section where you can think about putting your hand underneath your chin. And every time your chin drops, it gives you a clue to where that word part is happening. So in, yeah, struck, shun, right? And then we're reading it all together. Instruction. Okay, instruction. And we're reading it faster. Instruction. And then we're putting it into a sentence. So we use a routine to help us with the instruction of multisyllabic words. You can go ahead and write that sentence down. Great. And read that sentence to yourself and see if it makes sense. Great. So that's the idea of the multisyllabic word routine that we can use both at home and at school. We know as kids get older and they are involved in multiple classes with multiple content areas that words get increasingly difficult, especially as we're moving into middle school to high school and beyond. And in high school, kids are seeing words like endothermic, sublimation, polynomial, or polyhedra. So when we can use a routine with kids and when they can internalize a routine like this and they can apply it during the school day, we give them the tools that they need to unlock words that they may not already know. Let's take a minute to talk about what we don't want to do. So we don't want to just say to a child, go ahead and guess, or guess. Take a, look at that first sound, just guess, or look at the shape of the word and guess. So those are all things that we don't want to do. In the meantime, you can look at a checklist for the multisyllabic word routine in the electronic Google folder. So if you'd like to, go ahead and access the electronic Google folder that was in the training plan that's in the session materials under professional learning on our website. Go ahead and take a look at the checklist. You might think about, how might I describe this routine? If I was working with my child, what might I say? What are the parts? What are the steps? How might I use this to help someone else practice this routine? Maybe there are multiple people in my household who read with an older child. How can we all work together to make sure that we're using the routine and focusing in on all the steps? You can look back at the routine and you can think about the steps and think about, did I miss anything? Did I hit all the steps that I was aiming for? So, thinking about your older child or someone in your family that you read with, how might you use the multisyllabic word routine? Take a minute and jot down a few notes to yourself. So let's take a look at another routine that we can use to help with understanding and remembering what's been read. Have you ever read a book and caught your mind wandering and you've realized that you don't remember a word of what you've read and you have to go back and read it again? When you were in school, did you read from the first word to the last word? Or did you stop at each paragraph or even each sentence to ask yourself and answer questions or quickly summarize what you read? When reading together with your child, you might notice at the end of a passage or a page or a chapter of text that he or she does not remember what was read. You may have watched as all the words were read, maybe even correctly, but understanding what the text was about is now difficult. Get the gist is a routine that can help. If you see things like, I read it, but I don't get it, then maybe it's helpful for you. Using the Get the Gist routine helps kids to write a brief summary sentence. As older kids move through the grades, we know the text, the word difficulty, and the concepts become more and more difficult across more and more areas of content. And this routine helps with understanding what we read and can help with remembering what we've read. So, for example, you might be driving in your car with your older child, and you might be talking about something your child has read about today. You might ask, what was that about? You might ask, what was the most important idea? Who is it about? What was it about? What was the most important idea about them? And you might even say, so, what was the main idea? Can you shrink it? Can you get it down to 10 words? So that's the basic idea of the Get the Gist routine. Who or what was it about? What was the most important idea about the who or what? And what's the main idea in 10 words or less? Let's take a look at an example. So, what we're focusing in on is, who or what is this about? What's important about that who or what? And what's the main idea in 10 words or less? We want to put it in our own words, and we want to check our understanding. So this passage comes from Botanica School. Here we go with our passage. Puffin colonies are declining because there's not enough fish for them to eat, and fish populations are shifting as ocean temperatures rise due to global warming. Puffins can be hurt by oil spills, as oil can ruin a puffin's feathers. The loss of insulation from its feathers causes puffins to freeze to death. Fishing nets also can trap and drown puffins. So get out your piece of paper and jot down, who or what is this about? I wrote puffins and humans. What's important about the who or what? What's important about the puffins and the humans? So we know that there's warming and temperatures are rising in the ocean. We know this can leave puffins without food. We know they can be hurt by oil spills. And we know that they can get trapped in fishing nets. What's the main idea? So chunk that down to 10 words or less. So the way I would do this was to say, our behavior, human behavior, starves, freezes, and drowns puffins, reducing their population. Go ahead, try to see if you can write your answers to each of those questions. Let's practice again. Let's go on with our puffins. Puffins go on land to nest and lay eggs. Puffins build their nests on the sides or the tops of high cliffs on secluded islands. The nest is a rock crevice or a burrow dug into grass near the cliff. There, the female puffin lays a single egg, and both parents help take care of the egg. Every puffin has two bare spots called brood patches, and these patches have extra blood vessels that keep the egg warm. So, on your scrap paper, who or what is this about? What is important about the who or the what? And go ahead and jot down the main idea or the big idea in 10 words or less, and in your own words. Go ahead and stop the recording if you need more time. All right, let's try another. So when the egg hatches, the parents take turns bringing fish to the chick. For this task, the oversized beak comes in very handy. It has backward pointing ridges that allow a bird to carry many tiny fish at once. Chicks are ready to leave the nest about 40 to 50 days after hatching. They leave alone on their own, usually at night. Go ahead and practice like you're working with your child. Go ahead and use the routine. If you'd like to, you can pull up a checklist from the electronic Google folder. You can apply this routine to other settings that are just normal parts of your day. So, like you're driving in the car, or talking about a book, or reading a bedtime story, or while doing homework. So, there are lots of ways to use this routine. Take a minute and think about how you might use this routine. When does it make sense? And how might it be helpful? Go ahead and jot that down on your paper. Whew, we've covered a lot today. Let's take a minute to reflect on building family partnerships, helpful resources, and some next steps. So, with your scrap paper, go ahead and take a minute to think about or jot a response to a few of the questions below. So, think about how can I use the routines today to support my older child with reading at home? How can we, both home and school, work together to prevent the drop in involvement that sometimes comes with older children in middle school and high school? How can we work together? How can we partner together? Or how can we increase our home school connection and build trusting relationships where we can share information and address any issues that might come up proactively? Go ahead and jot down your response. If you're an educator and you happen to be listening to this today, we're glad you're here, and we know you have a family hat to wear as well. You might also think about how can I include families? What's being communicated to families? Am I giving information out as well as getting information from? How am I lifting up family voice to ensure that family voice is heard and many different families that represent the demographics in my area, my school area, my district area are being heard? So, a few next steps that you might consider. So, you might take a minute to fill out the guided notes from today's session, which you'll find in your electronic Google folder. You might try the routines and the checklists, practice with somebody at home, or get a group of family members together and practice those together, a group from school. Help your child internalize the routine. So if the child is able to practice and gets into the steps and knows the steps, then they can apply that at home and in school when they read a really tricky word or when they have a lot of material that needs to be read and understood, and they need a way to be able to do that. Think about how you can meet with other families, how you might learn together, yourself and other families. Maybe there's an opportunity for a role on a school leadership team or connecting to a school leadership team. Maybe there are other ways that families can work together to build family partnership in your area. And think about how you can partner with educators on behalf of your child. So today, we learned about the importance of family partnerships, and we shared some routines that can be used when a child doesn't know a big word or is having trouble understanding what's been read. You can try the routines at home. You can use a checklist to help you to get comfortable with the routine and to help your child internalize that routine. Jot down what you intend to do. Write an email to yourself or write a note to yourself to look at later. and connect with other families to continue learning. So we learned about a couple of things. That first, when families, parents, and caregivers partner with schools in a systematic way, our children benefit. And family partnership can help in many ways, including increasing achievement. Our goal is to collaborate to ensure that kids have successful literacy experiences across the school day, both in and out of school. We know we can use that multisyllabic word with those big, tricky words. We know we can get the gist or use that routine when we need to help with understanding. And we know there are a few things we don't want to do. So we don't want to just guess. We don't want to look at the first letter and try to figure it out. We don't want kids to give their best guess or just to skip things. So there are some things we want to do instead, and you've learned about a couple today. Thank you for taking time to join us today. Please do check out the session resources and materials. Go ahead and check out our YouTube as well. We have a YouTube channel with lots of wonderful videos connected to family partnership, to families, and to educators. Go ahead and check out that Meadows Center videos with lots of good information about videos directed exactly for families and parents and caregivers at home. But thank you for joining us, and we look forward to next time.